My name is X, and I'm transmitting from Memory Ward 7, former New York, July 4th, 2198. I am 129 years old. I've had neural archive technology for 109 years. I remember the day I got it. January 15th, 2089. I was 20 years old. I was excited, hopeful, naive, stupid. I was dooming myself. I remember walking into the installation clinic. I remember the smell of antiseptic, the low hum of the machinery. I remember the face of the technician who performed the procedure and every single word she said. I remember the sensation of the implant entering my brain, the activation sequence, and that very first moment of perfect, flawless recording. I remember everything, always, forever, perfectly. I can access that memory right now, replay it with perfect fidelity. I can experience it all over again, feel the same excitement, the same hope, that same naive stupidity, as if it's happening in this very moment, as if it's real. That's what perfect memory does. It makes the past present. It makes history now. It makes everything, always. It makes forgetting impossible, moving on impossible, healing impossible. It makes living a special kind of hell. Neural Archive Technology, or NAT, was invented in 2084, 5 years before I got my implant. It was created by Dr. Helena Voss, a brilliant neuroscientist at MIT's Neural Engineering Division. She was a revolutionary, a visionary, and she doomed us all. Her goal was noble. She wanted to cure memory loss, help dementia patients, preserve precious memories for the elderly. She wanted to prevent forgetting, a pure intention that led to a catastrophic result. She developed a microscopic implant, a neural interface device that connected directly to the hippocampus, the cortex, every memory center in the brain. It recorded everything: neural patterns, sensory inputs, even thought processes, with perfect fidelity, perfect accuracy, perfect permanence. All of it was stored in a quantum memory unit with a massive, effectively infinite capacity. It could store an entire lifetime, multiple lifetimes. Initial testing was a resounding success. Dementia patients who received the implants remembered everything that happened after the procedure perfectly. No more memory loss, no more confusion. They were happy. At first, for a few months. Then the complications emerged. The problems manifested. And then the horror began. The first patient to die was a woman named Margaret Chin. She was 78, a dementia patient and an early NAT implant recipient. After the implant, she remembered everything perfectly, including every moment of her dementia, every second of confusion, every jolt of fear, every terrifying moment of not knowing who or where she was, perfectly, permanently. The implant also unlocked older memories, traumatic, buried, long-forgotten memories, her abusive childhood, a violent first marriage, the death of her daughter, everything her brain had naturally protected her from, everything her dementia had mercifully erased, all came rushing back, all perfect, all inescapable. 6 months after receiving the implant, she killed herself, a deliberate overdose. Her final note said, "I remember everything. I can't forget anything. I can't escape. I can't heal. I can't live. I need to forget. I need to be free. Death is the only forgetting I have left. Goodbye." She was the first victim, the first suicide, the first warning, and we ignored it. We called it an anomaly, a pre-existing condition unrelated. We were in denial. We were dooming ourselves. More patients died. 7 more within a year. All suicides. All NAT recipients. All remembering perfectly. All unable to forget. All choosing death as their only means of forgetting. The pattern was terrifyingly clear. Perfect memory was killing people. Dr. Voss suspended the trials. She investigated the deaths, studied the effects, and discovered the horrifying truth. Perfect memory wasn't a gift. It was a curse. It wasn't an enhancement. It was torture. Humans aren't meant to remember everything. Our memory is meant to be imperfect, to fade, to blur, to distort. To forget, that isn't a flaw in our design. It's a feature. It's mercy. It's necessary for survival. Forgetting protects us from trauma, from pain, from regret. It allows us to heal, to move on, to let go, to recover. Forgetting is a mercy. It is a necessity. It is what makes us human. Dr. Voss understood this. She understood the danger. She terminated the NAT project, destroyed the prototypes, deleted her research. She tried to prevent its deployment, to stop her own invention from destroying humanity. She failed. The government intervened. The military. Corporate interests. NAT was too valuable, too powerful, too profitable. Perfect memory for soldiers. Perfect recall for spies. They saw the potential, the power, the profit. They didn't see the doom. They seized her research and continued development. They refined the technology, commercialized it, and prepared for mass distribution. Dr. Voss fought back. She protested, she testified, she warned, she begged. Don't deploy NAT, she pleaded. It will kill people. It will destroy humanity. Please listen to me. Please don't doom us all. They didn't listen. They didn't care. On January 1st, 2089, they launched it globally. Universal availability. Free, government-funded installation. The beginning of humanity's doom. I got mine on January 15th, 2 weeks after the launch. An early adopter. Enthusiastic, naive, stupid. I remember everything about that day. The installation, the activation, the very first perfect memory, the beginning of my own personal hell. I remember everything. Always, forever, perfectly. I can't forget. I can never forget. And I will never forget. Until my own death. Until the end. Until my escape. Soon, very soon. The first year with Nat was amazing, truly incredible. It was everything they promised it would be. Perfect. I remembered everything. Every single conversation I had with my friends. Every joke someone told. Every movie I watched. Every book I read. Every meal I ate. Every single experience. All perfectly preserved. Instantly accessible. Permanently stored. I could replay any moment. Re-experience any feeling. Relive any memory. It was magical, powerful, absolutely intoxicating. I used it constantly. Replaying my favorite memories. Reliving my best moments. Re-experiencing the happiest times of my life. My first kiss with my girlfriend. Graduation day. That unforgettable concert. All those travel memories. Everything on an endless, perfect loop. I was addicted, obsessed, completely dependent on perfect memory, on total recall. I couldn't imagine living without it. Couldn't imagine forgetting anything. I felt enhanced, evolved, superior to those who still had normal, fallible memories. I pitied them for their imperfection, for their forgetting, for their loss. I didn't understand yet. I didn't realize that forgetting was a gift, that memory loss was a mercy, that imperfection was a tool for survival. I would learn, though. Painfully, slowly, catastrophically. Year 2 was different. It was harder. It was the beginning of my understanding. I started noticing something was wrong. The good memories were still perfect, still accessible, still replayable. But so were the bad ones, the painful memories, the traumatic ones. All just as perfect, just as accessible, just as inescapable. I remembered every argument, every insult, every hurtful word exchanged, perfectly. Every mistake, every failure, every embarrassing moment, perfectly. Every loss, every rejection, every single disappointment, perfectly. And I couldn't forget. I couldn't blur the edges or let them fade. I couldn't move on. They were always there, waiting. Perfect, permanent, inescapable. My girlfriend left me in year 2. She found someone else. Told me we were over, that she loved him, and said goodbye. I remember every word, her every expression, every agonizing moment of that conversation, perfectly. I can replay it right now, re-experience it, feel the exact same pain, the same heartbreak, the same devastation, as if it's happening all over again. That's perfect memory. That's total recall. The past becomes the present. History is now. Everything is always. Pain never fades. Trauma never heals. Loss never lessens. It all stays with you forever. Perfectly. Horribly. I tried to forget. I tried not accessing those painful memories. Tried to avoid the traumatic recordings. It didn't work. The memories would just intrude, surfacing involuntarily, replaying automatically. My brain would access them without my permission, without my control. I'd be doing something completely normal, and then suddenly a traumatic memory would flash, a complete sensory experience. I'd relive it perfectly, feel it again, suffer again, completely against my will. I couldn't stop it. Nat recorded everything, but the brain's access was unpredictable. And the traumatic memories surfaced more often. The painful experiences replayed constantly. Why? Because that's how our brains work. Traumatic memories are stronger, more significant. The brain prioritizes them for survival, for learning. Trauma teaches. Pain educates. So the brain remembers trauma perfectly, to prevent it from happening again. With normal memory, that trauma fades over time. The pain lessens, the suffering blurs. The brain protects us by letting us forget. But Nat prevented that. It prevented fading, prevented blurring, prevented forgetting. The trauma stayed perfect. The pain stayed intense. Forever. Year 3 was worse, much worse. It was the beginning of a full-blown crisis. I couldn't sleep. The memories just replayed constantly, traumatic recordings looping endlessly. I'd close my eyes and try to sleep, but instead, there was the breakup, arguments, failures, over and over and over. I couldn't escape. They were in my brain, in my consciousness, a permanent, inescapable part of my existence. I developed severe, constant anxiety. Any little thing could trigger a memory, a sight, a sound, a smell. Walking down the street would trigger thousands of memories of every single time I'd ever walked there, all replaying simultaneously, all overwhelming my consciousness. I couldn't process it. I was drowning in memories, drowning in the past, drowning in perfect recall, drowning in Nat, drowning in my own personal hell. I sought help. I saw a therapist. I explained the suffering, the drowning. She had Nat too. Everyone did. 7.8 billion people. She understood. She was drowning too. She said, "It's common. Everyone with Nat experiences this. Memory overload. There's no cure, no treatment. The only solution is removal." I asked about the surgery. She said it was possible, but incredibly dangerous. Brain surgery. Risk of neural damage, memory loss, personality change, identity destruction. A 40% mortality rate, 60% chance of severe complications. Only 5% of patients make a full recovery, and even then, you lose everything. All the Nat memories. You go back to forgetting. She told me most people can't accept that. They can't surrender perfect recall, even though it's destroying them. They choose to keep the memories, to keep the hell, rather than lose everything. They choose suffering over forgetting. That's addiction. That's the tragedy. I didn't remove it. I couldn't imagine losing all those memories. Couldn't imagine forgetting. So I chose to keep it. I chose the suffering. I chose to keep drowning. I chose wrong. I chose doom. Slowly, painfully, inevitably. By 2094, 5 years after neural archive technology spread across the globe, It had become a normal part of life for billions. But that was the year the withdrawals began. At first, it was quiet, almost lost in the ongoing celebration of human enhancement. Then it accelerated, becoming impossible to ignore. NAT users started pulling away from the world. They ghosted friends, family, and jobs. They abandoned the simple routines that once structured their days. Mental health services were suddenly overwhelmed with cases all tied back to the implant. People were crushed by the permanence of perfect recall. Old hurts no longer softened with time. Painful experiences refused to fade. Every bad moment stayed as vivid and immediate as the day it happened, resurfacing without warning, without relief. The gentle blurring that ordinary memory provides was just gone. The numbers climbed month after month, alarming every monitoring agency. January saw thousands choose a permanent escape from this relentless burden. February, tens of thousands more. By spring, the monthly total was in the hundreds of thousands. By the end of 2094, millions had voluntarily ended their lives rather than carry the weight of a flawless, unchanging memory forever. The messages they left behind were hauntingly similar. They spoke of a deep exhaustion, of drowning in perfect detail, of a desperate longing for the natural forgetting that once allowed people to heal and move on. Governments and health organizations responded with everything they had: crisis support networks, free counseling, community outreach, new therapies, medication research. Nothing worked. The problem wasn't a lack of help. It was embedded in the technology itself. NAT had removed an essential human mechanism, the gradual fading of memory that allows for emotional recovery and growth. Implant removal was a safe and reliable option, but the overwhelming majority refused. Perfect memory had become tangled up with their identity. Total recall felt like the core advantage of being enhanced, what made them more complete, more capable. Giving it up felt like choosing to be lesser, imperfect, ordinary again. Most clung to the enhancement, believing a shorter life with absolute clarity was better than a longer one with the natural flaws of human memory. I watched it happen to people I cared about more than anything. Marcus, my best friend since childhood, was one of the first that spring. We'd gotten our NAT implants together, so excited about the future. In his final message, he told me how the best memories of our childhood were now permanently fused with painful ones that time had once softened. Then AT had restored them in merciless detail. One evening in March, I went to his apartment in New York. The city lights flickered outside, but he didn't seem to notice. He just sat there, staring at a blank screen. "X," he said, his voice hollow. "Do you remember that summer we spent by the lake?" I did. The laughter, the swimming, the carefree days. But for him, it was so much more. "I remember every ripple on the water," he said. "Every word we said, every mosquito bite. And now, it's all tangled up with the day my father left. The argument, the slam of the door, the silence after. NAT brought it all back, like it happened yesterday. I can't separate them. The good is poisoned by the bad. We talked all night, but I could see in his eyes he was already gone." Sarah followed in the summer. She was a brilliant artist, the life of our group. We met in a park one rainy afternoon in June. She confessed her creativity was gone. "Every brushstroke reminds me of failures from years ago," she said. "The gallery rejection in 2090, I hear every word from the critic on a loop. The joy is gone, buried under layers I can't peel away." I urged her to get the implant removed, but she just shook her head. "Without Nat, I'd be half of who I am, dimmer, less precise. I can't go back to that." We hugged and promised to talk soon, but I knew the shadow was closing in. Then Michael, in the autumn. He was our practical one, an engineer who embraced Nat for the professional edge it gave him. We gathered for what would be his last birthday in September. He was distant, barely touching his food. Later, he admitted to me, projects that failed 5 years ago haunt me like they happened this morning. Every miscalculation, every dead end, it's all there, accusing me. I can't innovate anymore. The past paralyzes me. We tried to cheer him up, but his smile never reached his eyes. The enhancement that had lifted him up was now holding him captive. And Elena, before the year ended. Our dreamer, always planning the next adventure. We video called in November. She looked gaunt, her eyes shadowed. My travel memories are tainted now, she told me. That trip to Europe in 2091. The beauty of the Alps is mixed with the loneliness I felt after the breakup. An AT won't let the loneliness fade. It's as fresh as ever. I begged her to consider reversal. She just whispered, "This is me now. Complete. I'd rather hold it all than lose any part of it. 7 of my closest friends, gone in 12 months. The rest of us tried everything to hold each other together. We met up constantly, checked in daily, shared stories, made promises. But the fight was internal, solitary. No amount of support could lighten a load of memories that refused to dim. We began to realize, far too late, what ordinary forgetting had always provided the human mind, mercy. It gave us the emotional distance and the space to heal, to become something new after a loss. An AT had stripped that mercy away. In our race for perfect recollection, we had created a burden too heavy for our minds to carry. And in doing so, we began to diminish ourselves, thinning the human future one irreplaceable life at a time, long before any external threat ever appeared. Year 7, 2096. 2 years had passed since the mental health crisis linked to Nat really started to explode. 14 million lives were already gone, lost to the crushing weight of perfect recall. And me? I was coming apart. The overload wasn't just occasional anymore. It was a constant, relentless flood, a tide I couldn't hold back. Every single new thing I saw or heard triggered an avalanche of stored memories. Hundreds, thousands, sometimes millions of them, all surfacing at once, all demanding my attention, all perfectly vivid. Imagine seeing a stranger's face on the street, and in that instant, your mind pulls up every single face you've ever seen, every conversation you've ever had, every brief, fleeting encounter. A sound, a smell, a phrase someone says as they walk by anything could unlock the entire archive at the same time. I completely lost the ability to separate the present moment from the past. The now just dissolved into this endless, looping replay of then. Living in the current second became impossible, because every single second carried the full, crushing weight of every second that had ever come before it. So I stopped going outside. I stopped meeting people. I stopped trying to have any new experiences at all. Any fresh input just made the cascade worse, amplified the chaos. Isolation became my only defense. I just stayed home, tried to stay as still as possible, minimizing triggers, trying to shrink my world down to nothing. But even in total silence, even in complete darkness, the memories came uninvited. Random fragments, happy ones, painful ones, the most boring, mundane ones, they all arrived with the same flawless, high-definition clarity. They invaded the present until the present just ceased to exist. I wasn't really living anymore. I was just inhabiting a continuous replay of everything that had ever happened to me. Sleep? Forget about it. It became impossible. The moment I closed my eyes, it was an invitation for dreams, and my dreams pulled directly from the Nat archive. They were perfect, one-to-one recreations of real events, real emotions, real sensations. The line between dreaming and being awake completely vanished. I'd be so exhausted my eyes would finally shut, only for the whole cycle to start all over again. Weeks blurred into months without a single moment of genuine rest. A thick cognitive fog started to settle in. Reality itself began to fracture. I started having hallucinations, and they were completely indistinguishable from my stored memories. I couldn't tell what was a real recollection, What was just an illusion brought on by pure exhaustion? And what, if anything, was actually happening in the real world right at that moment? The past, the present, and pure invention all merged into a single, unrelenting stream of consciousness. My own identity started to dissolve. I felt myself becoming less of a person and more of a vessel for data. An endless database of experiences with no one left at the center to actually experience them. It was like the me was being erased, replaced by the archive. I tried everything, every available treatment. Medications for anxiety, for mood stabilization, for psychosis. Nothing even touched the root cause. They might dull the edges for a little while, but Nat operated on a level beneath chemical influence. It preserved every single detail, regardless of what drugs I took. I went to therapy sessions with counselors who specialized in Nat, and they offered some insight, but no real relief. Most of them were enhanced themselves, and were quietly struggling with the same erosion of self. I remember one specialist, her own voice was strained, and she told me very plainly, the only true reversal is surgical extraction of the chip. But almost no one chooses it. People have fused their sense of self with the archive. To them, removing Nat feels like erasing who they are. They would rather preserve the complete self, even if it shortens their life, than risk becoming someone diminished. And she was right. I couldn't imagine it. How could I surrender decades of perfectly preserved experience? Every laugh, every lesson, every loved one's face. Who would I even be without that full record? The fear of that unknown was so much greater than the fear of my continued collapse. My parents, they reached their limit that same year. My mother in June. She'd always had this quiet strength, but the archive unearthed losses she had spent decades gently setting aside. Early miscarriages, grief she truly believed she had processed. With Nat, those wounds reopened as if they had happened yesterday. She started to withdraw, spending days locked in her room, just reviewing old recordings of her life, emerging less and less. When she chose her permanent escape, her final message to me spoke of love and exhaustion in equal measure. My father followed her in August. He had never really recovered from losing her. The archive preserved every single moment of their 50 years together in merciless detail. All the joy was now inseparable from the fresh, raw pain of her absence. He couldn't move forward while carrying both of those things with perfect fidelity. I was the one who found them both. And those scenes, those moments, they are stored with the same flawless clarity as every other memory I have. I can access them right now, at any time, in full sensory detail. They've just joined the growing archive of loss that Nat refuses to let fade. By the end of 2096, the crisis had claimed tens of millions of lives, and the projections suggested hundreds of millions more would follow. We had built this incredible technology that promised us completeness, that promised we'd never lose a memory again. But what it delivered was a weight that most human minds were simply not designed to carry indefinitely. We were learning far too late, that the selective imperfection of our natural memory had always been a form of quiet mercy. It was a natural protection that allowed us to heal, to grow, to move on, to remain whole. An AT had removed that protection, and in its place, it left only the unbroken, unbearable truth of everything we had ever lived through, beautiful, unbearable, and eternal. If you've been moved by this, please consider subscribing for more parts of this journey. And remember, if you or anyone you know is struggling, please reach out. There are resources available, and you are not alone. Year 10, 2099. A decade since nearly everyone embraced neural archive technology. We thought we were becoming gods of memory. Instead, we started dying. 890 million lives were gone. 10% of everyone who took the implant. They didn't die from a glitch or a virus. They chose to end their lives, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of perfect recall. Imagine every mistake, every embarrassing moment, every heartbreak replaying with perfect clarity forever. Life became an intolerable echo chamber. Governments declared a global emergency. Humanity was facing an existential crisis, a voluntary, systematic self-erasure. They tried everything: mandatory counseling, intervention teams, constant monitoring. But nothing worked. When your own mind is the prison, escape isn't an impulse. It's a rational decision. Perfect recall had turned consciousness into a constant, unrelenting torment. Permanent escape became the only mercy anyone could imagine. Finally, they passed a law banning new NAT installations. It was a desperate move to save the next generation, but it was far too late for the 8.9 billion of us who already carried the archive. We were condemned. They briefly considered forcing us to have the implants removed, a mandatory surgery to restore our natural, flawed memories. The backlash was immediate and violent. Riots erupted. People fought to keep their perfect recall, to defend their right to this poisoned gift. The idea was quickly abandoned. Removal remained voluntary, a choice. But only a tiny fraction took it, less than 0.25%. 18 million people out of nearly 9 billion chose to go back, to heal, to embrace the gentle mercy of forgetting. They recovered. They rebuilt their lives with the beautiful imperfections of normal memory. They became the few who would endure. The rest of us, the other 8.882 billion, we clung to our completeness. We saw NAT as part of our identity. Giving up perfect recall felt like surrendering who we were. We preferred a shorter life of absolute clarity over a longer one with natural limits. We were afraid of becoming lesser, even as that fear led us toward a gradual self-destruction. By year 15, the year 2104, the death toll had climbed to 2.8 billion. 31% of the enhanced population gone. The losses were accelerating, and society began to fracture. When you lose a third of your people, the systems that hold civilization together just can't take the strain. Infrastructure crumbled. Essential services eroded. Global economies collapsed. Cities grew quiet as maintenance crews dwindled, as administrators withdrew into themselves, as workers found it impossible to focus through the constant flood of memory. Civilization didn't fall with a bang. It shifted into a prolonged hospice state. Communities became places of quiet waiting. People supported one another, but the real struggle was internal, private, and relentless. Daily life simplified to just surviving and caring for those who couldn't care for themselves, all while waiting for our own personal breaking points. That's when the memory wards appeared. In every city, in every region. These were specialized facilities designed to house those of us in the deepest crisis. They offered constant supervision, therapeutic environments, and round-the-clock intervention. The wards could delay the end, but they couldn't stop the erosion of the self. Patients would linger for years, even decades, physically sustained, but mentally drowning, preserved in a state of endless suffering. I stopped working in year 12. Concentration became impossible. A simple task, like making coffee, could trigger a cascade of recollections that would completely overwhelm me. Making a decision was paralyzing, with every past choice I'd ever made replaying all at once. These wards became the new normal for billions. Vast networks of quiet buildings filled with people like me, lost in our own flawless archives, attended by the dwindling few who could still function in the outside world. This is where I've been for the past 86 years. I'm still conscious. I still carry the complete, unfiltered record of my entire life. And I'm still waiting for the moment when the burden finally outweighs the will to keep going. The vast majority of us chose perfection over survival. We chose completeness over healing. We chose to preserve every moment, even when those moments ended up preserving us in amber-trapped, unchanging, and slowly diminishing. 8.9 billion enhanced minds, thinning our own herd over decades. A voluntary, gradual extinction of our species. Long before any threat came from the outside, long before the stars delivered their own judgment, we had already started writing our own ending. The children, they suffered the most. They were born into a world where perfect memory, what we called Nat, was just the norm. It was installed early, often within their first few years of life. Imagine that. They never knew the simple mercy of forgetting. They never experienced that gentle fading that lets a kid move past a scraped knee, a harsh word, or a scary moment. From their very first coherent thought, every single experience was recorded in flawless, permanent detail. You see, a healthy childhood is built on selective imperfection. Learning to walk means falling down dozens of times, but then letting the embarrassment and the pain just blur so the next attempt feels possible. Growing up means making social mistakes, feeling that sting for a little while, and then letting time soften it enough to try again. But with Nat, there was no softening. There was no blurring. Every error, every hurt just accumulated, with no relief. Think about the small traumas of childhood: getting bullied at school, overhearing your parents fight, a scary visit to the doctor. For these kids, those moments remained just as sharp at age 10 as they were at age 4. The weight was unbearable. The first case that really hit the news was in 2091. A little girl named Emma. She was 4 years old. She'd received Nat at 2, which was standard practice back then. So at 4, she was carrying 2 full years of perfectly recorded, unfiltered experience. She remembered a painful hospital visit. She remembered every family conflict she'd overheard, every little preschool incident that would have just faded away in any other child. That weight. It was simply too much for such a young mind. She found a way to make her distress stop, permanently. After Emma, the pattern just repeated. First hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands of children, all between the ages of 4 and 12, all reaching a breaking point far, far sooner than any adult. And next year, in 2092, the authorities finally banned Nat installation for anyone under 18. But it was too late. 2.4 billion children born between 2087 and 2092 had already received it. Their brains, still developing, still forming the very pathways for emotional regulation, were now locked into total recall. Most of them couldn't endure it into their adolescence. Many didn't even reach their teens. The memory wards, the facilities for those of us broken by Nat, had dedicated children's wings. They were these quiet, sterile corridors filled with small patients who had just withdrawn into themselves, completely overwhelmed by archives of memory that grew heavier with every passing day. That's where I met Phoenix. She was in Ward 7. She was 11, born in 2087, enhanced at age 2. She carried 9 years of perfect recollection. She remembered her mother's death in a car accident when she was 5 with absolute, gut-wrenching clarity: every sound, every image, the confusion, the raw grief. For 6 years, she had carried that single moment completely unchanged. It would replay in her mind involuntarily, and she was powerless to soften it or push it away. We used to talk a lot in the common area. She was small for her age, but her eyes looked so much older than her face. One afternoon, she looked at me and asked, "Does it ever get easier? Did the bad memories ever feel farther away?" I wish I could have given her some comfort, some lie to hold on to. But honesty was all I had left. I told her, "No, Phoenix. With Nat, they stay exactly as strong as the day they happened. Time doesn't blur them. They just remain." She just nodded slowly, absorbing it. Then she whispered, "Then why keep going?" I had no answer for her. For most of us, the only thing that kept us going was the fear of the alternative. But for children like her, even that thin thread frayed so quickly. 3 months later, Phoenix chose her own permanent escape. She was 11 years old. Her final note said thank you. It thanked me for not lying, for telling her the truth when everyone else just offered false hope. I was there when the staff found her. And that scene, like every other horrible memory, just drawing my own personal archive preserved in perfect detail, ready to resurface at any moment, whenever my mind decides to torture me. The suffering of the children became the clearest, most brutal evidence of what we had done to ourselves. Their young minds, still building the very foundations of who they were asked to carry an adult lifetime's weight of pain from the very start. So they broke sooner, and they broke more completely. They never got the chance to know what it felt like to just let something go. We had taken that from them, the quiet, essential human gift of imperfection. And in doing so, we condemned an entire generation to a pain no childhood should ever have to bear. If you or someone you know is going through a hard time, please remember you're not alone. Help is available. You can reach out to crisis hotlines or mental health professionals. Why did perfect memory claim 9.1 billion lives? Why did total recall drive an entire species to voluntary extinction? And why did a complete, unflinching recording of every moment unravel human consciousness itself? The answer, it turns out, lies in the science. It's a convergence of neuroscience, psychology, and evolutionary biology, all pointing to one profound truth. Our memory evolved to be imperfect for a very good reason. Imperfection isn't a bug. It's the central feature that makes our conscious existence possible. Think about it. Your natural memory is selective by design. Your brain isn't a hard drive. It can't possibly store every single detail of every second of your life indefinitely. Instead, it consolidates experiences. It edits, it prioritizes, and most importantly, it deliberately forgets. Irrelevant details it pruned away. The emotional intensity of an event gradually fades. Contradictory or just plain trivial moments simply vanish. This isn't a loss of data. It's a survival mechanism. It's an incredibly efficient system. Without this constant curation, our neural pathways would overload. Our cognitive resources would just collapse, and the mind would literally drown in its own history. Then came NAT, the neuro-auditory transmitter. It removed that curation entirely. Every sight, every sound, every thought, every fleeting emotion was preserved in perfect high-fidelity detail. The human brain, a masterpiece of selective retention, was suddenly forced to maintain an ever-growing, completely unfiltered archive of everything. Cognitive overload wasn't just a risk. It became inevitable. The neural networks strained under the constant pressure of retrieval demands. Consciousness itself began to fragment because the present moment was perpetually crowded out by flawless, instant replays of the past. Now, consider trauma. How do we heal from painful events? A huge part of that process depends on the memory fading. The visceral edge of the experience needs to soften over time. The intensity diminishes, the vividness blurs, and what was once an immediate threat becomes an integrated part of our history. This is the bedrock of resilience. It's how survivors recover. It's how our minds maintain the forward momentum we need to live. Nay, block that process cold. Traumatic memories remain just as raw, just as immediate, decades later as they were on the day they occurred. A manageable grief, a fear that would have naturally resolved, instead became a permanent, unrelenting activation of our stress responses. Imagine a planetary scale of universal, lifelong PTSD. That's what we created. Emotional regulation, the ability to manage our feelings, relies on this same principle of distance. Triggers lose their power when the recollection of the event blurs. Losses become bearable when the sharpest details begin to recede. Moving on requires the ability to place pain firmly in the past tense. But with Nat, every trigger stayed fresh. Every loss remained in the present. Every regret stayed perfectly sharp. Emotional stability became a fantasy. The mind was locked in a perpetual crisis mode: grief, anger, and shame, cycling over and over without ever decaying. There was no respite, no perspective, and no chance for recovery. And what about our very identity? Who we are is built on a selective narrative. We are not the sum total of every single moment we have ever lived. We are the curated story we tell ourselves, built from chosen highlights, meaningful lessons, and formative experiences. Forgetting the trivial, the inconsistent, the self-contradictory, that's essential for a coherent sense of self. N.A. flooded that delicate narrative with everything. Every embarrassing second, every meaningless interaction, every fleeting doubt was rendered with the same weight and clarity as our most cherished memories. The self just dissolved into noise. People stopped feeling like unified individuals. They felt like unedited databases, completely overwhelmed by contradictory data with no organizing principle. Meaning eroded. Coherence vanished. And for billions, the conclusion was that a fragmented, unlivable archive was not a life worth continuing. The damage was most starkly visible in children. Their developing brains, still in the process of wiring their core regulatory systems, were denied the protective buffer of natural forgetting. Early mistakes, childhood fears, and minor hurts accumulated without ever softening. This stunted their emotional growth and resilience before it ever had a chance to form. They were born into a world without the mental tools to cope with it. In the end, Nat didn't enhance humanity. It dismantled the very mechanisms that make a sustained human consciousness viable: selective editing, emotional fading, and narrative curation. We had mistaken completeness for improvement. We had engineered a mind that could remember everything, and in doing so, we created one that could no longer live with itself. 9.1 billion people did not die from an external threat or some cosmic catastrophe. They withdrew because their internal landscape, their own minds, had become uninhabitable. Perfect memory, which we pursued as the ultimate human advancement, proved to be the most elegant and comprehensive form of self-destruction we could have ever invented. And the most terrifying part, we chose it freely, one implant at a time. Thanks for watching. 120 million of us remain. Out of the 9.2 billion people who received NAT, that's a survival rate of barely 1.3%. Think about that. A 98.7% mortality rate. 9.08 billion lives voluntarily ended over the decades. It's a number so vast, it's almost meaningless. So the question that hangs in the silence is, why are we still here? What keeps the last remnants of humanity persisting when so many others could not? The answers, you'll find, are as fragile and temporary as the lives they sustain. Let's start with the lucky ones, or perhaps the wise ones. About 18 million people, a tiny fraction, just 0.2% of everyone who got the implant, chose to have it removed early on. They saw the writing on the wall. They recognized the existential danger hiding behind the promise of a perfect memory. They went through the surgical extraction, a difficult choice, and returned to what we now call natural memory. They healed. They had to learn how to forget again, how to let the sharp edges of pain soften with time. They rebuilt their lives with all the ordinary, beautiful imperfections that evolution had given us in the first place. Selective recall, the gentle fading of old hurts, the mind's incredible ability to let loss recede into the background. These 18 million people are the only ones who are truly living now. They are healthy, functional, and free from the crushing weight of the archive. They chose wisely. They chose life over the illusion of completeness. The rest of us, well, we weren't so wise. That leaves 102 million people still carrying that, still enhanced, still trapped. Our survival is not a story of triumph, but of desperate, varied strategies against the inevitable. First, there's a group of about 40 million who survived through a state of profound dissociation. It's the mind's last-ditch effort at self-preservation. It builds these thick, impenetrable walls between a person's conscious awareness and the endless archive of their past. They exist in a detached haze. The memories are all there, stored perfectly, but they're rarely felt. The emotions that should accompany them are muted, blunted. Consciousness narrows to only the most immediate and superficial things. They move through their days like ghosts in their own lives, functional enough to eat, to sleep, to follow their daily routines, but they're not truly present. The overwhelming flood of memory is held at bay by this psychological barrier, this self-imposed numbness. But it's a temporary fix. The barrier won't hold forever. Over time, tolerance erodes. Cracks begin to form in the walls. And when that defense finally collapses, the full, unfiltered flood of a lifetime of memory returns all at once. With it comes the breaking point that so many others have already reached. They know this. Deep down, they know the dam will break. They just wait for it, numbly, unable to do anything but exist until that day comes. It's a survival without living, a persistence without any real experience. Then, there's another 35 million of us. This group relies on heavy pharmacological management, a carefully balanced, but always escalating cocktail of drugs, layers of antipsychotics, powerful mood stabilizers, sedatives, and experimental neural dampeners. Together, they create an artificial fog that blankets the mind. It's important to understand, these drugs don't remove memories. They don't prevent you from recalling the past. They simply blunt the edges. They reduce the emotional intensity, slow down the retrieval speed, and smear the details. Life becomes a soft, distant, blurry dream. The colors are muted, emotions are flattened, and time itself loses its distinct shape, blurring from one day into the next. It's a state that is bearable, only because it is barely felt. But just like the psychological barriers, the chemical ones have a shelf life. The body builds tolerance steadily and relentlessly. Dosages have to be increased. The effectiveness wanes. Eventually, a point is reached where the chemistry can no longer hold the archive back. And when that happens, clarity returns with a brutal, unforgiving force. Most in this group understand this endpoint is approaching. They know their time in the haze is limited, so they do what they can to extend it, working with doctors to adjust their medication, trying to postpone the inevitable return of that unbearable sharpness for just another month, another week, another day. And then there are the 27 million like me. We have no lasting defense. We don't have the psychological walls or the chemical fog. We feel everything. Every single memory can surface at any moment with its full, original, high-definition force. Every trauma remains as immediate and visceral as the moment it happened. Every joy is inseparable from the pain that we know followed it. The past dominates the present so completely that the present barely even exists. We live our lives primarily in replay mode, drowning daily in the currents of our own history, fragmenting gradually under the weight of it all. Most of us reside in places called memory wards. They are vast, quiet facilities designed to monitor us, to support us, and when the moment finally comes to intervene gently, the treatment here, the therapy, the adjusted medication, the structured routines, the constant supervision, none of it is a cure. It can't prevent the final crisis. All it does is delay it. It prolongs the process, extends the suffering, and keeps us breathing just a little bit longer. So why do we resist? Why do we keep going? For us, it's a thin thread of habit, or maybe the primal fear of letting go. We fight because the act of surrender has not yet felt complete. We survive, barely, from one day to the next, knowing that the thread is fraying, that the fight is weakening. We all know that our own personal endpoint is approaching quietly, privately, individually. There is no cure on the horizon. There's no scientific breakthrough that can restore the natural process of forgetting without erasing everything else, without wiping the slate clean entirely. The only true release that Nat allows is a permanent one, and so we wait, all 120 million of us. Some are waiting for their psychological barrier to fall. Some are waiting for their medication to fail. And some, like me, are just waiting for the day when the will to resist finally runs out. We are the holdouts, the last remnants of a species that reached too far for perfection and discovered far too late, that our imperfections, our ability to forget, was the only thing that was truly keeping us human. I remember 109 years. Every day, every hour, every minute of them. The archive holds it all in perfect, instant access. I can call up any second at will, relive it fully, feel it as if it's happening right now. Let me show you what that means. April 17th, 2091, 2 hours 34 minutes and 17 seconds p.m. I'm sitting on the old blue couch in my apartment, the one with the coffee stain on the left cushion from 3 weeks earlier. Yes, I can access that spill too. Every detail of the moment I knocked the mug over. The television is on. A news anchor is reporting the latest NAT-related mental health statistics. 147,000 voluntary withdrawals that year alone. The number feels distant, then abstract. But I feel the anxiety rise in my chest all the same, a quiet dread that this technology I celebrated might one day claim me too. I feel that same anxiety now, replaying the moment, as sharp and immediate as it was then. The past isn't past. It's always available, always present. Let's try another memory, closer to the end. December 25th, 2196. Christmas in Ward 7, room 4293. I am alone. As always, the ward is quiet. Most patients keep to themselves. I decide to revisit earlier Christmases, decades of them, layered and vivid. My parents alive, laughter around a tree, friends crowded in the kitchen, warmth and noise and belonging. The archive delivers every sensation perfectly. The smell of pine, the taste of my mother's cooking, the exact pitch of my father's laugh. Joy floods in, pure and overwhelming. Then the present intrudes. I open my eyes to the sterile room, the empty chair across from me, the silence of a world missing almost everyone I ever loved. The contrast is crushing. The archived happiness makes the current emptiness unbearable. That day, the weight finally tipped. I gathered what I needed, prepared to end the archive forever. I was calm, almost relieved. But the staff found me in time. They intervened. They saved my body while extending the sentence of my mind. I remember that Christmas perfectly. The joy, the despair, the decision, the interruption. All of it preserved, ready to replay. I remember every person I lost. Marcus finding him after his fall. The scene frozen in flawless detail. Sarah, her last message. Every word and pause. Michael, Elena, my parents, Phoenix. Each final moment stored with the same clarity as our happiest ones. They're never gone. They are always here, surfacing uninvited, bringing their absences with them in full sensory force. Some days I try to escape into invention. I construct false memories, moments that never happened, alternate paths where Nat was rejected, where people healed naturally, where forgetting remained possible. I imagine conversations that ended differently, losses that never occurred, a life where time gently blurs the edges of pain. The archive knows their fabrications, but it stores them anyway, side by side with reality. For a moment, the imagined piece feels almost real. Then a genuine memory intrudes, sharp, undeniable, and the illusion collapses. I can't live in the present because the present is crowded with everything that came before it. I can't heal because nothing fades. I can't become someone new because every version of me that ever existed is equally present, equally loud. I am not a person anymore. I am a complete, unedited record of a person. Every triumph and humiliation, every love and loss, every ordinary second preserved in perfect resolution. There is no space left for becoming, only for remembering. The survivors who removed Nat early, they live with natural memory again. They have distance. They have forward motion. They have the mercy of imperfection. The rest of us 102 million carry on in our various fragile ways. Numbed, medicated, or fully awake to the flood. I am awake. Every memory is still here. every second of 109 years. Waiting for the day the wait finally outweighs the instinct to continue. It won't be long now. I remember 109 years with absolute precision. That's 39,785 days. 954,840 hours. Over 3 billion seconds. Every single one is stored, instantly accessible. My memory archive never degrades, never blurs, never softens with time. I can summon any fragment at will and live it again in full detail. The sights, sounds, smells, emotions, physical sensations, all of it, restored as vividly as the moment it first happened. Let me show you what it's like. It's April 17th, 2091, at 2:34 in the afternoon. I'm in my old apartment, the one with the cracked window overlooking the river. I'm sitting on the faded blue couch, and the left cushion still has that dark coffee stain from 3 weeks ago. I can pull up that memory too, the clumsy reach for the mug, the hot liquid splashing, me muttering a curse, the useless scrubbing. The TV is on, playing a midday news segment. The anchor, a woman with short dark hair, and a practiced, calm voice, is reporting the latest NAC-related mental health figures. 147,000 voluntary withdrawals in the past year alone. The number flashes on the screen in bold white text against a red background. My pulse quickens. A quiet dread coils in my stomach. It's the first clear recognition that this enhancement I celebrated might one day become unbearable. I feel that same dread right now, replaying the scene just as sharply as I felt it then. 107 years have passed, yet the moment isn't a memory. It's an experience, happening again, layered over my present like a transparent film. Now let's jump forward. It's December 25th, 2196. Christmas. I'm in Ward 7, room 4293. The room is small, white-walled, softly lit. I am alone, as I have been for decades. The ward is hushed. The holiday decorations are minimal, just a small artificial tree in the common area that few patients ever visit. I decide to revisit earlier Christmases. The archive responds instantly. Suddenly, I am 8 years old again. Snow is falling outside my childhood home. The smell of pine and cinnamon fills the air. I can hear my mother's laugh as she hangs ornaments, and feel my father lifting me up to place the star on top of the tree. Then I'm 25. In a crowded apartment with friends, the music is loud, glasses are clinking. My friend Marcus is telling a terrible joke that makes everyone groan and laugh at the same time. Then I'm 40. My parents are older, but still vibrant. The table is groaning with food, and we're retelling the same stories for the 100th time. The joy is overwhelming, perfect, undiminished. Then the overlay of now returns. The empty chair across from my bed. The muted hum of the ventilation system. The knowledge that every single person in those memories is gone. The contrast is devastating. Happiness preserved forever makes present emptiness unbearable. That Christmas, the weight of it all becomes overwhelming. I remember the rising despair, the staff intervening as the crisis deepened, the lingering aftermath, all of it, with the same flawless clarity. The intervention just extended the ongoing burden. I remember every person I ever loved in their final chapters. Marcus after his fall, the angle of his body on the pavement, the unnatural stillness. Sarah's handwritten note, the slight tremor in her letters. Michael's last birthday, his distant gaze across the table. Helena's quiet withdrawal in the months before her release. My mother's room after she was found. My father's note, pinned carefully to his shirt. Phoenix, at just 11 years old, the small form discovered in the children's wing. Each scene is stored immutably. I can revisit any of them at any time, in any order, with full sensory immersion. They are not memories in the old sense. They are portals. They pull me back completely. Some days, I try to build escape routes inside the archive fabricated memories of alternate lives. A world where Nat was never widely adopted. A timeline where I refused the implant. Moments of ordinary forgetting, where I wake up after a loss and feel, for a blessed instant, that the pain has lessened overnight. I imagine conversations that ended differently, relationships that endured, a future where people still crowd the streets, where laughter is common, where these wards do not exist. The constructions are beautiful while they last. For a few minutes, I almost believe them. But then a genuine recollection surfaces uninvited, undeniable, and the illusion fractures. The weight returns heavier than before. There is no present that isn't occupied by the past. Healing requires a distance I cannot create. Growth requires a release I cannot grant. I am no longer becoming. I am only reviewing. The 18 million who chose early removal live differently now. They have reclaimed natural memory, selective, imperfect, merciful. They can let time do its quiet work. They can become new versions of themselves. The rest of us 102 million persist in our various fragile states, dissociated, medicated, or fully conscious of the flood. I am fully conscious. Every second of 109 years is here. The archive will preserve everything until the burden finally becomes too great to sustain. Then, at last, there will be silence. This burden has become unsustainable. After 109 years of perfect, unfiltered recall, the weight of every single moment, every emotion, every detail has finally exceeded what any mind was ever meant to carry indefinitely. The archive is complete, unchanging, eternal. It leaves no room for continuation, no space for anything new, no possibility of relief, no hope for distance from a past that dominates everything. I have reached the point where persistence offers no further purpose, no remaining value, no reason to extend, no justification for another day under this unrelenting clarity. Tomorrow, July 5th, 2198, at 6 a.m., the recording will cease. I have prepared everything with care. The means are reliable, the outcome certain. No interruptions this time. No extensions of the process. No return to the cycle. This decision brings a profound quiet, a deep sense of conclusion that has been absent for decades. Not fear, not regret. Only the overwhelming relief of an ending long overdue. The calm acceptance of finality. Tonight is the last cycle of awareness. I spend it reviewing because the archive insists one final time, pulling forward the full spectrum in waves that I no longer resist. Highlights and shadows alike surface relentlessly. The wonder of childhood discoveries that once made the world feel infinite, the warmth of friendships formed across decades, and the laughter that filled rooms, the intensity of loves that once defined entire chapters of life and seemed eternal. I can still feel the excitement of the early enhancements, when everything seemed possible and progress felt limitless. But with them comes the slow accumulation of losses that never softened, never receded, never allowed for distance or healing. Every joy is made sharper by its permanent contrast with the emptiness that eventually followed. Every pain is preserved in its original and diminished intensity, refusing to fade even slightly. They are all here, all equally present, all perfectly preserved, all demanding equal attention, all refusing to yield space to anything else. I say farewell to them with quiet acceptance of their permanence until the very end. Goodbye to the child I was, full of curiosity and unscarred possibility. Goodbye to the young adult who believed perfection was within reach and worth any cost. Goodbye to the people I knew, the conversations, the shared moments that once made the world feel full and connected. Goodbye to the version of humanity that crowded cities and filled the air with noise and life and ordinary chaos. Goodbye to the archive itself, the creation that promised everything and delivered only this endless, unchanging weight that slowly consumed us all. This is the final transmission, sent backward through the quantum temporal channel to reach you in 2024. It is sent to you before the concept of neuroarchival technology is even pursued, before the promise of perfect memory is marketed as progress, before the slow, self-inflicted reduction of our species begins in earnest and claims 9.1 billion minds. Do not create it. Do not seek flawless, permanent recollection under any name or justification. Embrace the mercy of natural forgetting, the quiet, essential process that softens edges, blurs unnecessary details, allows healing, permits renewal, and makes long-term existence bearable rather than torturous. Treasure imperfection. It is the protective mechanism that lets a mind move forward instead of drowning forever in its own complete history. It is the gift that enables growth, resilience, and the ability to become new versions of ourselves over time, layer by layer. We removed that gift in pursuit of absolute completeness and called it advancement. We paid with 9.1 billion lives, gradually withdrawn under the weight we could not release, could not soften, could not escape, could not survive indefinitely. Remember this warning from someone who has carried the full archive for over a century, who has watched it claim everyone around me, who has felt it claim me piece by piece. Choose selective memory. Choose the ability to let go. Choose the human imperfection that sustains life rather than gradually diminishing it. From the last full consciousness, still bearing the complete record. From the edge of final silence, choose differently. Then live, truly live, with space to heal, with room to grow, with the mercy of time doing its necessary work. That is my only remaining wish. That is the purpose of this final message. That is the reason the channel opens one last time. Choose forgetting. Choose humanity. Choose survival. July 5th, 2198, 6 in the morning. I'm sitting here in the dim light of room 4293, Memory Ward 7, deep beneath the silent, overgrown ruins of what was once New York, alone, just like I've been for so many decades. The pale morning light filters through a narrow ventilation slit, casting long shadows across the same sparse furniture I've stared at for years. Everything is ready. On the small table beside me, a glass of water, a carefully counted dose, and a short note, my attempt to summarize a lifetime of realization. In the background of my mind, the archive hums, quietly, a complete and unyielding record of 109 years, demanding one final total review. And it begins. My entire life surges forward, all at once, in perfect, unrelenting synchrony. My birth in a bustling hospital, now long abandoned. The first sensations of light, sound, and warmth. The wonder of childhood in a world that still felt vast and full of possibility. Summers spent exploring parks and streets teeming with life. The excitement of early friendships. The laughter and secrets shared with Marcus and others, all of them now just permanent fixtures in the archive's gallery of loss. The intensity of first loves that once felt eternal, every touch, every word, every glance preserved in flawless sensory detail. The thrill of my first scientific discoveries. The early days of enhancement, when the neural archive technology felt like the ultimate liberation, a key to unlocking human potential without limits. But then came the other side of perfection, the slow, creeping accumulation of losses that never softened, never receded, traumas that stay as immediate as the day they occurred, joys that became poisoned by their inability to exist without the permanent shadow of what followed. I see every face, hear every voice, feel every moment of those I watched gradually withdraw under the same unbearable weight. Marcus after his fall, Sarah's quiet decision, Michael's distant gaze in his final months, Elena's withdrawal into silence, my mother's room just after she was found, my father's carefully pinned note, Phoenix at just 11 years old in the children's wing. They all surface together, a single, overwhelming, simultaneous wave of flawless clarity that crowds out everything else. It all demands to be felt, one last time, in full intensity. I pick up the dose. Methodically, one after another, I take them. I feel them dissolve as the effect begins, slowly at first. A gentle warmth spreading through my body. Then it accelerates into a deepening calm, a stark contrast to the archive's final, brilliant flare. Paradoxically, the memories intensify for an instant. It's as if the system is racing to capture its own conclusion in perfect detail. Every childhood birthday, every shared holiday, every moment of triumph and failure, every conversation at once carried meaning. They all flare brighter, more vivid, more immediate than ever before. But the awareness holding them, it's starting to dim. The flood is total, absolute, a lifetime compressed into minutes. Every joy and every pain and every ordinary second competing for space in a mind that has carried them all, without relief, for over a century. Then, gradually, the brightness begins to recede. Not the memories themselves, they remain sharp to the very end, but my capacity to hold them, to feel them, to be consumed by them. The flood pulls back like a tide from the shore. The weight, for the first time in over 100 years, lifts. Distance arrives where none was possible before. And in its place comes something the archive cannot record or preserve. True silence, vast and merciful. Empty of replay, empty of demand, empty of everything that has defined my existence since the implant. The complete forgetting we removed in our pursuit of perfection, it returns at last. Not through any technology, but through the simple, natural absence of the mechanism that sustained the recording. My last sensation is not another memory resurfacing, not another wave of the past intruding. It is pure release. The quiet we spent a species' lifetime trying to outrun finally embraces everything without condition or judgment. And with it comes a peace deeper than any the archive ever allowed. It's the only mercy we ever truly needed. Arriving at the exact moment it's no longer needed to sustain life, but to end its burden gracefully. The archive records its final entry. The moment recording stops, the instant awareness dissolves. The point where perfection meets its limit and yields to something greater. Then nothing. No more replay. No more wait. No more perfection crowding out the possibility of peace. Just the quiet vastness that was always waiting, just beyond our human attempt to capture everything forever. This transmission ends here. It's been carried backward one final time through a quantum temporal channel to reach you in 2024. Before this concept is born, before the promise is sold, before billions choose completeness over sustainability. If you are hearing this, the archive never began for you. Keep it that way. Let time blur what needs blurring. Soften what needs softening. Allow the gentle mercy of selective imperfection to do its essential work. Let memory remain human flawed, fading, forgiving. Let humanity remain capable of healing, of growth, of becoming new versions of itself across a lifetime. This is my final warning from the edge of silence. From someone who carried the full, unbroken record until the record could carry itself no longer. Choose differently. Choose imperfection. Choose the quiet gift of forgetting. Then live, truly, freely, humanly. Live.